Hello, this is Professor Lucien, and this is my review, or the instructor's review, of some of the readings from Module 5, which is in Week 5 for Summer 2020. On the screen here, you can see that I've got OSHA's, record-keeping standard or reporting requirements. We're going to get to that. The topic for this week is quality management, system safety approaches, record-keeping, and it's all built around the idea of data. What kind of data are we collecting? What are we looking at when it comes to the safety program? And so I'm going to review an article that I had published back in 2006, which was the culmination of a lot of years worth of both literature review and surveys and other stuff we had done as part of a big research project that Peter Hoenecker and I did with CQPI and also the construction group. So the purpose of this paper was really to attempt to synthesize what we knew about safety management with what we knew about quality management. And so I did a data mining, I think is what we call it, in Safety 701. And this is a paper that I shared in Safety 701 that, because students tend to get confused that, what is a literature review when you're requiring me to do a literature review for the introduction? Well, they are two different things. And that is, what I was trying to do was mine out the language and findings from a large set of published research in peer-reviewed journals in order to help or investigate the similarities between these two systems and what that means. And this was dedicated towards the construction industry, just so you know, that made it a lot more difficult. So the context is safety and quality management approaches. The scope is construction, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. And what it does is it gives you a really good feel for how to put together a paper. So the background. So I've got all the so I had to do a search for all this, but it wasn't the actual methodology. It was just building up why, the justification for the issue. The scope would be the nature of construction and why it's difficult to define what is needed when sometimes you don't understand as a contractor what the total outcome is going to be. You're putting in what is being asked of you, but you may not know how it connects to other parts. And so for the general contractor, that's their role. And if they're not communicating it effectively, or if they haven't communicated with the owner, the person who hired them, on what they want, what they expect, then you're going to have issues. If you wait until all four walls in the ceiling are up, and then they walk in, they go, "Yeah, this isn't what we wanted." It's going to be costly, and who's going to pay for it? And therefore, all of your deadlines have been blown. But what I did here is I combined some of the more readily accepted versions of what safety management is and what quality management is. And I think you're probably seeing some of the same names that we've covered in the beginning of this course to build this construct. And so this is what I was really testing. That safety management is defined this way. Quality management is defined this way. The outcomes of quality management are here. The outcomes of safety are here. But as you can see, there are similarities here. So therefore, don't they fit? Do they or do they not fit? Because if you're pursuing similar outcomes and the structures are the same, can't you just double them up, and maybe get more out of it than you put in? So I explained how I went about it. I provided some of the basic characteristics that came out of my initial work. And then I have an enormous data table here of all the papers that I looked through. And you see, I was looking for certain elements that were discussed in these and what the results were. And the basic idea is, quality management is a technique that can be used to drive safety. However, in construction, when quality isn't well known and safety is variable, I should say, changes a lot in construction, it's difficult. It's not fully understood how it could be used in construction, though. If a general contractor, if the construction site was right, it could definitely find the benefits. And so that's what this was all about. This study found that you should be able to take a quality management or use quality techniques to improve safety, even in construction when things are so variable and constantly changing. They could be used, but it takes a lot more work. Yeah, so that was the article that I had published. Another thing I provide as a reference. Now, many of you have taken the system safety course here at Whitewater, taught by Dr. Choi. And I put this in here because I wanted to refer to it as, and this is from the New England chapter, so maybe there's a better article or better reference out there, but it meets what I wanted out of it. It tries to define all the elements predicated on this military standard, historical perspective, and the different types of approaches, and refers to how to become a safety professional. So it's a comprehensive document. It's 40 pages long. And if you just read on your own, you're probably like, what does he want out of this? Well, I'll go over it for you. So system safety at its, basically at its title implies it's an engineering approach. And this military standard leans it more towards military, the U.S. military's version of engineering, which tends to be the Army Corps of, is it the Corps of Engineers? Army Corps of Engineers? Sorry if I'm not saying that right. They got their coverage is very wide and well known. And they bring in environmental as well, as they should. They've got this personnel safety, but it's more or less the outcomes of personnel safety. And then they show that there are a lot of overlapping but common elements here with system safety, the individual focus on elements of safety, transportation, OSHA fire, all that kind of stuff, software safety. Very interdisciplinary is what they're trying to point out. They give us some definitions of things. Even the term fail-safe that Todd Coughlin has mentioned more than once. Talk about life cycle, which I think is good. But did we see any sort of demonstration or definition of human error? I'll just cut to the chase. We don't. Because I looked through this whole document a couple times now, and I was looking for things like human error. But what I found is, sure, there's personnel safety, but it tends to refer to the human element as an operator. That's important. That's an important distinction, because an operator is like a cyborg. They're given a task and they do it. Sure, they may screw up once in a while, but we're not going to talk about that because we'll just blame them for it. And so to personnel error. Okay, so I guess they mention it right there. To confine what can contribute to personnel error or a system deficiency, and not talk about it from how it interacts with other forms of failure or other forms of success is a very limiting view. And we've been talking about this. That's why I'm bringing this up, that the system safety techniques were born to serve engineers. Engineers are all about the design of things to meet an outcome. Most do not have an understanding of the human element and consider the people working as an operator, a person who's there doing a task. They don't possibly, maybe they don't even want to understand what goes into a person to work a job during the day, how their external life and experiences affect what they do in there, and how their relationship with the coworkers and supervisors dictate how they act. I don't think they do that. We covered that, though, this past week. So what I'm basically getting across is these are not the end-all, be-all solution. This is a tool in a much larger toolkit, realizing it has some considerable limitations. I guess that's what I want to say about it. There are considerable limitations to system safety techniques. They serve a role. I'll give you that. I'm not saying throw them out. I'm just saying consider their limitations and what they do. They're meant to lay out how certain elements and points interact with each other, what leads from one thing to another. Some of them allow us to assign some numbers such as risk numbers, whether it's severity or probability, detectability, things like that. We're allowed to multiply those things together to get a risk number or risk priority number. So again, it serves a purpose, but it's missing it misses some important focus that we've been talking about in this class, and what leads to people to possibly commit an error due to organizational, environmental, task, and technology issues that are deficient. How are they handling it? And their ability to detect when something doesn't seem right, to stop work and go get assistance, that they trust management if they see something that goes wrong. Versus this is more or less attempting to understand things prior, and then you turn on the machine or the plant and it starts running, and then, oh, something went wrong. How did we miss that? Oh, it was probably the operator, right? So these things have a purpose, but they have very distinct limitations. And that's what I want to talk about, because these bring in certain measures, as does the quality. What quality is focused on doing is ensuring an outcome or a deliverable or a product that meets certain standards that are well-defined and can be measured. Therefore, there are measures within the process itself that can be collected to ensure that the end, the outcome, the deliverable, the product itself is going to meet those predestined measures. And if the in-process measures go out of tolerance or out of expectation, something can be corrected in process to reduce waste, to ensure that either an error is controlled and removed, or it can be corrected before you get to the end, the outcome. So that's what this is meant to do. It gives us a more of a process view of things. But again, I want you to make sure that you understand its limitations. Okay, that's why I brought up that document. So now that we've talked about quality management, we talked about system safety techniques, let's get into OSHA record keeping, because that is one of the required standards. If you have 10 or more, I thought it was 11 or more. Many employers with more than 10 employees. That's what it's supposed to be. 11 or more, 10 or less. 10 or less, you're not required to do it unless you're in a high hazard industry that they have listed. But this is the standard of contention that, if somebody reports to me that they got hurt at work, do I have to take record of it? Do I have to investigate it? And so I don't like this standard. I have more contempt for 29 CFR 1904 than any other OSHA standard, by far and away. This particular site here on the OSHA website, you can go to it, and it links to a lot of different things. How do they define injury and illness? What considers first aid? That's a big question. But what I wanted to teach you, this is my viewpoint, this is my opinion, is that the same exposure that can result in something that requires first aid and the person can go back to work is the same exposure that could lead to someone dying or becoming disabled. Now, if you believe that way, then why aren't we recording and investigating those as well? If you believe, on the other hand, that a first aid could never result in anything more severe than a first aid, then why record it? Now, if you believe that, let's have a debate. Let's talk about it. But in my experience, 25 years of doing this, I see a lot of similarities between if somebody gets something in their eye, but they can just, flush it out or tear it out without requiring anything beyond first aid. We don't write that down. But what if they get into their eye and they rub their eye and it scratches it? Now all of a sudden it becomes infected. Now all of a sudden the eye needs to be amputated or removed due to that infection. It was the same exposure, but now they have a disability because they lost an eye. I'm yelling at you, and I always get really passionate about this because this upsets me that OSHA is being so hubris as to say that there are two different things. And I think maybe maybe it's not on purpose, but I feel that that's what they're saying. If you don't know anything about OSHA record-keeping forms, you can click here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. The 300 is the log of injury and illness. The 300A is the annual summary, and the 301 is the incident investigation. And I got issues with that as well because and I provide to you in the bonus section of this module a 300 log form that I created through Microsoft Excel, which separates out column F into 3 different parts, as it should. And then I also standardize the entries, as it should, if you're going to analyze it. Because if you don't standardize what the entries are, what they should be, then it's completely random. And you can't analyze it. You cannot. There's also a new requirement on submitting records, which I doubt if OSHA even knows what that means. So let's have people not record everything. Let's limit how they investigate and put it on paper. And then when they submit it, we'll analyze it in aggregate and publish it. Garbage in, garbage out. That's what we have here, garbage in, garbage out. But it's a rule, and if you don't follow it, you'll get cited, right? Yep. And actually, if you look at the most frequently cited standards within specific industries and not, what am I saying? And not just construction, because construction has more inspections than general industry does or any specific industry. Therefore, what's cited in construction tends to dominate the top 10. If you remove that out, you do see that within the top 5 most frequently cited standards, within the general industry standards, 1904 does come up. And it's not, way up there, of course not, but it's considerable. It's cited, okay? And so I think that's why so many safety professionals, or more or less companies that don't have safety professionals, freak out about this. How do I keep things off the log? Because if it gets on the log, it increases my incidence rate, which is it's a bad transition to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics collects data on fatalities, injuries, and illnesses, primarily defined by 1904. So we're already, it's already an issue. They calculate the incidence rate, which I hope you know what that is already. I'll discuss a little bit in lecture, but it's the number of recordable cases, depending on what type of incidence rate you're interested in. If it's total, it's all of them. If it's DART, it's days away restricted transfer cases only. Multiplied by 200,000, divided by the hours worked. And it's meant to be the number of cases per 100 full-time equivalencies. And there's issues with that. There's a lot of issues with that. One is the 200,000 constant. What that basically means is 100 workers times by 2,000 hours worked per year. That is 50 weeks. So they're assuming we take 2 weeks of vacation. They're also assuming we only work 40 hours a week. I don't know many people who only work 40 hours a week or are actually able to take off full 2 weeks a year. So it's an underestimate. And so here's the thing. If you put an underestimate in the numerator of a fraction and the denominator is bloated or actually represents it, you're going to have a product that has a lower number. So as the denominator goes up, the product goes down. That's how that calculation works. So in doing so, we're actually getting a low estimate of what's really going on. That's right off the bat. I suppose, I don't know if you guys spend much time here. I spend a lot of time on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, though it's not a worthwhile endeavor by any means. Talks about fatalities and whether they go up or they go down, but it's so generalized that how can it help a single company trying to get better? And it's not a great comparison. Already the incidence rate I don't like. I don't like when it's company-wide. Why? Because if you look at what actually gets recorded after we do our magic, that was first aid. It doesn't have to be recordable. I don't want to record it. Do we have a lot of manager-related injuries? Upper management? No, we don't. But we include their hours in the denominator. So a company-wide incidence rate is not representative because we could have a worker in a particular department that's getting throttled, that let's say 9 out of 10 of them are experiencing lost time injuries. But when we put it all together with the rest of the company, we're below 1 For our total case incidence rate, we're doing so much better than the industry average. So therefore, we're doing great. Are you? You know, if one group, if one job title, one work group within your company is getting throttled, you could have as many. It's not a good representation. I don't like organizational level incidence rates, straight up. Not including how poorly the record keeping standard is. I don't like the calculation. I don't think it tells us much. I think we can do a heck of a lot better. But still, I do look at them. I monitor them. Let's see here. This is from 2019. Do we have any 2020 updated stuff here? I could click on here. I think private industry is like around 2.9 or 3. Private industry, 2.8. Okay, this is 2018 numbers. There's always a delay because they have to do the analysis. We usually get quicker annual response from the fatality because they verify that easier, and there are less numbers, 5,000 versus millions. And this is an extrapolation. They don't sample everybody. They sample an acceptable, a statistically representative sample and extrapolate. So the total case incidence rate for everybody, this includes government, state government, they always tend to be higher, 3.1. Private industry, 2.8. And then based on your NAICS, North American Industrial Classification Code, you can see what your industry is. What I'm going to cover in the lecture, and you're going to read about through Revit and manual, is the ratio of these things. Relating back to Heinrich's ratio and Bird and Germain's ratio, which I'll cover in the lecture, that maybe ratios are a better measure, a better comparative metric than the incidence rate. Because what it does is, within a particular industry, and it should be within a particular company, goes to show us that when an exposure occurs, what is the likelihood that it could be severe? If it's a high likelihood, so that almost every recordable is lost time, we got to do something. That's dangerous. Or are they under-reporting and under-recording what's really going on? Two bad things. Whereas if the likelihood of it being severe is very low, let's say 1 in 10 recordables is lost time, either they're being more responsible with reporting and recording, or it's not a very dangerous workplace. Yet the overall numbers may be indicative of a high injury rate, but it's a low severity rate in comparison to the ratio of the two. That's the way I like to look at it. So let's go back here. It's kind of, I don't like, they seem to change their reporting every year. Not happy about that at all, as you can tell. Let's see if they give us I like the comparison from year to year. Sometimes they publish it this way. I like to see it in PDF personally. Here's just a side-by-side comparison on what they've been doing. There's been a lot of discussion within the safety field about how incidence rates have not been going down at the same rate as they have. I was hoping that I could just click on one of these and see. Oh, I did see something for a PDF version there. But sometimes what I do is from the home page of this, I believe national data, go here. I've got charts in PDF. This is for 2018. And here we go. This is what I was talking about. Wow, I can't believe I found it that fast because they move things around and hide things on us so much. So this is published back in November of 2019. It's got 2003 through 2018. Why 2003? Because that's when they in 2002 is when OSHA shifted from the 200 log to the 300 log, and because those changes were so considerable, and it's probably around the same time that they switched from the SIC, Standard Industrial Classification coding, to the NAICS, and so that changed things a lot. And so I think this goes back to where we're actually kind of comparing one kind of apples to another kind of apples. I'm sorry I'm being so down on this. So as you can see, we were experiencing pretty consistent drop from 2003 to approximately 2009. What happened in 2009? The economic downturn. That's correct, and that's why things got kind of crazy. But then it picked up, here, and so So we got to see another 0.2 drop here, and then since then it's been pretty consistent. And for the first time, I don't think it happened before. It's stayed consistent because it jumped up. Red jumped up. That's DART. I brought that up before. Takes away restricted transfer. It may be a rounding error because what goes into it is the green and the purple. And the green and purple stayed consistent, but so from a rounding error, who knows? But everything else here is pretty much the same, except we had a jump. We had a jump for the first time in this recorded history from 2003. Otherwise, we'd experiencing pretty good stuff. Other recordables is always an interesting one. So it kind of went down, and then it went down and went steady, and then it went down and down and down and down. And I bet you, now that's outside of the DART. The DART does not include the other recordable cases. These are the ones that are in between, whether they have any restrictions or lost time, and whether it's more than first aid. So they should be going back to work and doing their own job. And you can see here, it's pretty consistent. But what's interesting is the serious injury fatality people use this comparison here over time to say that no, the exposures that lead to something this severe is very different than things that are not, because look at how they're changing over time. I don't agree. I don't think that explains it. Here's the other thing. I'm going to drop one more bomb on you before I sign off. And that is, when you look at these, and this is going to come out in the lecture, and this is really upsetting to me, and I just kind of started exploring this last year. When we see that the private industry average here for all recordables, total recordables is blue here, is 2.8 out of 100 full-time equivalencies. Does that mean that's the average? Is that the average? Technically, it is the average, but it is not even close to the median. And that's what's probably more important. If company incidence rate data is normalized, which is to say the average and the median are basically the same, we have the normal curve. Whoop, whoop. We don't have that. We have this asymptotic curve. So what is this really telling us? It's average because we have a group of companies who reported incidence rates above 100, and how many zero companies reported. Wouldn't that be a better perspective, a more honest presentation of what companies are reporting for injuries each year? I think it is. I think this is dishonest. To be honest, to be completely upfront with you, I think this is a very dishonest display of what companies in the United States are reporting for injury rates. I think it's misleading, and I think we need to better understand what is actually being submitted to BLS, and how just adding up everything that was collected and dividing it by everything that was collected is not representative, because they're taking it from a whole versus from individual company level analysis. This goes back to our analysis of levels. It's not an honest review of what's really going on. I'm going to leave it at that. If you haven't spent time at BLS, I could create a 1 hour video just reviewing OSHA record-keeping and reporting requirements. I could do probably a 2 hour just on BLS, because I have so many bones to pick with this group. But I'm going to try to cover it in the lecture. I hope this was helpful. You got a few other things to read, but what I really want you to focus on is the ratios. The Revit paper, which I like a lot, and the manual paper. It's taking what we currently have and making a better understanding of it, given certain assumptions, and that's going to be discussed in the lecture as well. I'm going to get off my soapbox now because I've built it up really high. Thanks for listening.